Welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. Glad to have you with us today. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker. I'm the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and here with us today, a couple of guests, but one that you know that I will introduce, not a guest, our co-host, Chad Robichaux, the founder and president of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and always glad to have you with us watching. And if you are watching and have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, you need to do that. Do it right now. Don't waste any time. Subscribe. And then when you subscribe, go over to that notification bell, hit the notification bell there. That lets you know when more content comes online. And we would love to share that with you. And we not only put this show on our YouTube channel, but tons of other content, all designed to help you and maybe someone that you know with struggles in life or perspectives that you need. And we'd love to share that with you. So go ahead and subscribe if you have not. Hit the notification bell. If you are listening somewhere else, many listen to the podcast version of this show or listen over at our partners at Mojo 50 Radio. Again, thank you for listening. So thankful for the relationship we have there. But when you get done with this, jump over to YouTube and hit the notification bell after you have subscribed, and that would be awesome. Looking forward to our show today and our conversation with our guest all the way from snowy Wisconsin, Derrick Van Orden. Derrick Van Orden is a friend to our organization, and very, very happy that he would have the time. We had to reschedule this a few times, but be able to make the time to talk to us. Derrick is currently running for the United States House of Representatives for Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. Among other things, he is an American patriot, retired Navy SEAL, husband, father, grandfather, and Christian, and farmer. But SEAL is the only thing that matters to Derrick. That's all he cares about. So we'll jump into all of it. But guys, thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And that was a patently incorrect statement towards the end there. But yeah, I was a SEAL, for a long time.
A long time.
21 years out of my 26-year career. And obviously, that's a very important part of my life. And I learned so many lessons and got to work with some of the best men and women in the world, frankly, and from America and not from America. There's some great folks out there, and when you're part of a high performance team, by definition, everyone on that team performs at a high level, and that's wonderful. It was an honor to serve my country, and now I'm getting back into public service. I consider my military time public service, and it was unexpected, but I'm back in the game now.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think, for those of your constituents in your area in the 3rd District of Wisconsin, a lot of folks may know you, others may not, or not know your entire story. One of the interesting things about service to me is always the question of how did someone go from wherever they grew up to serving in the United States military, and then in a community, all jokes aside, like the Special Operations Command and the Navy SEAL community. Interesting journey typically. Talk about that if you wouldn't mind. Take a few minutes, where you grew up and kind of the motivation for you, not only to serve for a lifetime, but as a young man looking to military service. How did you end up in the Navy and then in the Navy SEALs?
Yeah. Well, I'm a Midwestern boy. Was raised over in Waukesha County, which is a few hours away from here in a town called Heartland. We now live in Hager City. That's Pierce County, right along the river. And my brother and I were raised by a single mother in, the only way to describe it is abject rural poverty. I would say that my father was not an honorable man when it came to family matters. But I learned from my mom, as did my brother, the importance of hard work and the dignity of labor. And she did everything she possibly could to support us. And when we were younger, as I'm saying, abject rural poverty, there was a time when we needed assistance, and we were on government assistance for a period of time. And I get that, that's a social program. It's not socialism. A huge difference. But so we wound up moving to Oregon when my mother got promoted, and I went out with a friend of mine one night and honestly decided to join the Navy on a lark. Initially, now you guys are going to think this is funny, and this is where, just so your audience knows, both you two are Marines, and that's where all these cracks are coming from. So I decided to be a Marine with my friend, and then fortunately, I sobered up and decided to join the Navy, right? But this is before all the books, that a bunch of folks have written, and the movies, and one of which I'm in, about the SEALs. So I didn't know anything about naval special warfare. And I just joined the Navy. I worked on a tugboat, cleaned a lot of toilets. I painted, if you lined up the land mass or the mass of the ships that I painted, it would be the entire land mass of the United States. I'm convinced of that. But what that taught me as a young man was humility and the dignity, again, of labor that my mother tried to instill in us that you just don't get as a younger person. But that was a very humbling experience for me to work with people that were absolutely dedicated to America. You know, these are sailors that are out there, just like you consider a grunt Marine. You know, they're doing their best all the time. And I decided to become a corpsman or medic for the other branches of service. You guys know what corpsman is, doc.
Right.
And when I went to Corps School in San Diego is where I found out about the SEAL teams from this guy named Randy. I won't mention his last name, but he was a chief. And he walked into the room and he said, my name is Chief Randy. I'm from SEAL Team 5. If you want to be a SEAL, come talk to me. If don't, F you. You're probably going to quit anyway. And then he like just walked out of the room, you know? And I was like, oh, I'm going with that guy. You know what I mean? I had never seen somebody so intent on what he was doing, and I was just drawn to that. You could smell the professionalism, you know, and the dedication. And so I decided to go to SEAL training, and there's guys who had joined the Navy to be SEALs, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do that. They said, well, you can't just say you're going to go do that. And I was like, why not, man? I'm going to go do that, and I did. And that started this journey, you know, a 21-year journey of just growing into my career and understanding my purpose in life and going through some really incredibly unique experiences, you know, and I was just so happy to be able to wind up in that community.
One of the three of us, our friends, SEAL, probably the most squared away guy I know in my life. I've ever met in my life is Ben, who's a Navy SEAL, lives down in Coronado. But he tells a similar story. I asked him one time, how'd you end up going through SEAL training and becoming a SEAL and doing those things? He said, well, I was painting a ship and I saw some guys sunning themselves on the front of the ship, and I said, who are those guys? He said, I want to do that. I don't want to do this anymore. And so that is his entire story. He said, I didn't know anything about SEALs, but I knew I'd rather do that than what I was doing.
Yeah. One thing about a lot of, I mean, we joke about it, but there's been a lot of SEALs stories, books, movies, and that really have brought SEALs to the limelight. And I think it's a good thing because it's helped the recruiting efforts to bring some of America's best young men into one of the best military outfits. But one of those movies you were in, Act of Valor.
Yeah.
And you played Chief, which I think you were a chief at the time. You played Chief.
Senior Chief. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you.
I played myself.
And one of my favorite scenes in any movie is a Crisco scene. Yeah. And
that's unscripted, Chad. You know that, right?
Yeah, that's what you told me before, and I have no doubt it was.
Yeah, man. That was again, you know, it's the opportunities present themselves to people often, and oftentimes people don't take the opportunity to take the opportunity. Sometimes they don't recognize it, and other times they're just too afraid to do something. And I have the unique combination of being naive about enough stuff that I just will say, you know what? I am willing to try that. And when I say naive, I don't mean foolish. I mean, oftentimes you don't really understand what something takes to accomplish it, you know? And it's the old joke about the kid that used to ride his bicycle on the fence, and then someone finally told him about gravity, and that's when he fell off, right? That's the naivete I'm talking about. Don't think for a second that I'm a fool. Mrs. Van Orden didn't raise a fool.
I will say your family has a family of service, and that just speaks a lot about you. And I mean, I just think it's incredible that you're breeding service from your family.
Yeah. Well, you know what I find, and thank you for that. But what I find awesome is that both of our girls have decided to stay home and raise their kids along with their husbands. You know, that's a family decision. And to me, that really says a lot about Sarah Jane, my wife, and how she raised the kids. Because I was gone really for most of their childhood. I was spent about 16 years away from home. Al-Qaeda is not in Wisconsin, and I'm thankful for that. But so, yeah, we get great examples from different sides of the family.
Where did your faith come from? You describe yourself as a Christian. Where did that
Sure.
come from? Was that before the military, after the military?
It was in the military. And it's funny, it was an awesome unplanned segue because when we found out that Sarah, my wife, was pregnant with our second child, we were in Texas, and I came upstairs. I was staying late. I was in the Army Special Forces Medical Sergeant's course, which is an incredible program. Very difficult.
18 Delta, right?
18 Delta, that's correct. And you know what, those guys, for all the smack we talk about our fellow servicemen, it's just that, you know, we're just joking. That was an incredible program. But I came home and I went upstairs, and there was a pregnancy test, and it was positive, sitting on the sink. And this is in the middle of this big Texas rain, you know. Texas rain's hard. But I couldn't find Sarah, and I walked around, and finally I found her. She was outside, and she was crying in this Texas rain. And I was like, honey, why are you crying? You know, you're pregnant and we're having a baby. And she said, yeah, we're having a baby and you're going to hell. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty stern. But so I went home and I asked Christ to be my savior right then. And I didn't know anything about Christianity. But here's something, and if anyone's, you know, paying attention to this or listening, this is a lesson I want everyone that's listening to take away from this. If you have real faith in someone and you really trust them, and you know, as a husband should trust a wife and a wife should trust a husband at that deep level, if they are so convicted about something, you need to listen.
Sure.
So I had such faith in my wife and such love for her. And when she said something so profoundly, that would be very hard to say, I took her on her word. And that started my journey. And I'll tell you how incredibly goofy I was about this, right? So we were going to First Presbyterian Church in San Antonio. And the pastor, he's died since then. His name was Louis Zabinden. And he would read scripture and he would say, the grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our Lord shall stand forever. And I turned to Sarah and I'm like, wow, that guy should write that down. And she was like, you, sir, are a goon. I mean, I didn't even know it was in the Bible. So
That's crazy.
But you got to start somewhere, right, man? Jesus takes you where you're at, you know, right there. You don't have to be here or there. He takes you right where you're at. And it's interesting. Now, this is I hate to politicize religion, but so I am a Christian and I'm running in a district that's kind of purpley. And I've been explaining to people that I will be representing Christians. I'm going to be representing Muslims. I'm going to be representing atheists. I'm going to be representing Wiccans. And I'm going to be representing them all equally, because that's how people should be treated at all times, with equality. And sometimes it's hard as Christians for us to break that mold because people don't believe us when we're like, hey, man, I'm taking you right where you're at. Yeah. That's what we're supposed to do, you know?
And appreciating, you know, even the biblical or Christian principle of, now if you're Presbyterian, you may not agree with this, but the idea of free will, that everyone has the opportunity to choose, you know, what they are doing. And just how important that is. I think as a Christian, you should have the strongest voice defending the rights of others to worship as they please. I honestly believe that. How important has your faith been then to your career? We talk about resiliency a lot. We talk about you know, the ups and downs of military service, not only separation from your family, but those combat deployments and the various things that you're exposed to. And you know, Chad and I would both say, and we do through our program, that faith is the foundation that allows you to go through those things, not only in a good way, but in the right way, one that reflects your purpose. How has your faith guided you through a very long, very eventful career to where you are right now?
Okay. People say there are no atheists in foxholes, and that is not true. There are plenty of atheists in foxholes, and they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified. Some of them to the point of paralysis, and then many to the point after they get out of their service, they're incapable of dealing with the stressors that they went through. And that's because they're not grounded somewhere. And that's really the reason your program has just been wildly successful, is because you tie it to something that is real, and that is faith, right? And so that's how it's helped me. It's helped me to boldly move forward through life, because I understand what happens. I've already read the end of the story. And it's much more comforting to know how something's going to end, you know. But let me say something about this COVID thing going on right now. This is the perfect storm. So few people in the United States now have had to face their mortality until they're well into their 80s now, or 70s, 80s. You know, I think it's 82 is life expectancy. So they've never had to face their mortality before. And then if you look at the charts, the people that actually have religious faith is going this way. So now you have people who have never had to face their mortality, and they don't know what happens if they die, which leads to really terror. It's the same concept of someone in a foxhole that has no understanding of faith, you know, and that's why everything's kind of, you know, bonkers. It's bananas in the country right now. I think that those two things have converged. And that's what we're seeing the result of that.
What's interesting too right now is Americans are able to not deal with what happens after you die because we're able to stay so busy and still so engaged in so many things. Well, right now, not only has the fear of death become, you know, a fear that's real to a lot of people, but the time to think about it, to process it, to ask those questions has also become real. You know, civil liberties and the issues of the First Amendment aside, the fact that we're going through this at a time where churches, by and large, and Christians have been forced to broadcast their message more broadly than, say, you need to come to a building to hear the message. I think God is really using that in a lot of people's lives because for the first time they are being confronted with that reality and that truth.
Yeah, there are going to be some good things that come out of this. Grandmas and grandpas, you know, we have 6 grandchildren. We see our kids. We're a little more tech savvy than the average folks, but people are being able to communicate in a way that that is becoming more meaningful. And I'm a firm believer that these social media platforms have had the reciprocal effect of what they were intended to do. People get nasty on Twitter because they have no accountability. And the very things that were designed, allegedly, or designed to bring us together have separated us. Well, now we have more time, as you mentioned, and the element, the humanity, we're able to express more clearly. And from the concept of my district, we had our caucus this last Saturday. And there was more people attending this caucus. That means there's more people that can express their opinions than there has ever been because people didn't have to go to a building. So the vote, and we came out really well. We got 73% of the vote on the first ballot, but there was more people there than ever because of this COVID thing. Let's pretend that moms and dads are staying home with their kids and they go, you know what, we really like our family and we're sick of this rat race because now they have a chance to see it. And maybe one of them decides to stay home to raise their children. How awesome would that be? How awesome would it be that someone has watched 8,000 episodes of The Tiger King, which I have not watched, and then they're like flipping through the whatevers and they wind up on Grace to You or on this program. And they're like, wow, what the heck is that? And then they pay attention and they hear God's word for the first time. How awesome is that? I mean,
it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's happening.
Well, hey, so people that have lived our experiences, they wind up one of two ways. They wind up really auguring in because they don't know how to deal with things, or they become the world's biggest optimists because we have seen all this stuff and we've seen the good outcomes of it, man. So being an optimist pays. And I'm hoping that also is going to bleed out into the civilian community where people really can see the silver lining on stuff, man. I mean, I have always been super happy.
I have a question for you that's really important to me in the work that we do at Mighty Oaks, the work that I'm involved in from the advocacy side. I'm now chairman of the Faith-Based Veteran Service Alliance. Today I was on a call with Dr. Barbara DeHallen, who's she's the President Trump appointed her as the head of the Prevents Task Force. And so she's the Prevents Task Force is the Veteran Suicide Task Force for the president's goal to eradicate veteran suicide. And so being in Congress, and I believe you're going to be there, and I already know your answer to this, so I'm asking for the listeners because I think it's very important to know where you stand on this. People in Congress are the people we're leaning on to pass legislation, to pass bills, to serve our veterans in and out of the VA system. And one of the things that we're big on is bringing faith programs that have been very successful, proven to be very successful, back to work with government entities. President Trump signed an executive order last year. Secretary Wilkie is in the process of implementing that order. Again, on the phone today with the Prevents Task Force, and they're doing they have some incredible visions. And the Prevents Task Force is not for faith-based only, but they really want to see faith-based programs included because they see the success of it.
Right.
Just as in Congress, what's your plans in the area of Mighty Oaks, veterans care, of bringing faith solutions back to? And when I say faith solutions, I don't mean just Christian solutions like you mentioned earlier. All faith solutions.
Right.
What do you see for the future of veterans care and faith solutions?
For my district, in particular, the 3rd Congressional District, I'm going to do something that's never been done that I'm aware of. I know for here it's never, and I'm not sure what it is around the nation, but I'm going to have a veterans coordinator that will be on my staff, and I have to pay for this person out of my pocket. I will. It's that important to me, just to help coordinate these efforts that take place. And here's the question that you have to ask yourself really about everything, and that as military folks or former military folks, we're able to answer this question. We understand that we have to answer it honestly. Does it work or not? You know what I mean? Does something work? I think that you've had about 3,500 folks go through your program, and you've had one suicide, and that person had pre-existing, pretty serious psychological conditions. Am I correct?
We've had a couple of suicides over the last 10 years, but both, all of those would have been people who struggled before, and we worked with them. But yeah.
So you have a decimal point and a zillion zeros, and then like a 1 or 2 at the end of that.
That's
okay,
right.
That works. So at the core of anything we do, and at the core of everything I will be doing in Congress, it's going to be based on fact and reality. And if we really don't want our service women and men committing suicide, we're going to back programs that actually work. The pie in the sky sort of stuff, whatever the heck it is. I have a great idea. I went to college for 500 years. I want to pour a gallon of meds down someone's throat for the rest of their life. That doesn't work, and it's proven not to work. Is there an instance or instances where bridge medication is required to help someone stay away from that ledge? 100%. But that's not a solution. So here's my answer to you, Chad. If something works and it will reduce the amount of active duty and veterans, so we forget about active duty suicides, active duty and veteran suicides, then I will fight to make sure that that's implemented and funded. And I will do that as a job, man. That's if it's important enough, and it is oftentimes, to send our servicemen and women overseas to fight for our freedom, then you bet it's important enough. And it has to take a priority to make sure that we take care of the life cycle of that person. And I'm doing that. And I'm a man of my word, dude. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I want all the listeners to hear it, because I mean, for me, like I've observed, we have a Congressman Van Taylor, who's a former Force Reconnaissance Marine, Dan Crenshaw, who's a former Navy SEAL. You see these guys come from the communities, and they really care about the communities they came from. And these 2 guys are just 2 examples of many Congress members that are there fighting for veterans care and for the best practices. And I think because people that came from the military, doesn't mean if you wasn't in the military, you're not qualified to be in Congress. People that came from the military bring a very pragmatic viewpoint of how to do things. And like you said, if it works, then you're going to do it. And I love seeing that. And I think it trickles over. Dan Crenshaw is a great example of watching how he performs outside of veterans issues, and just such a pragmatic approach to governing.
Why don't more, because that's exactly right. Why don't more service members do what you're doing? Or veterans do what you're doing? 18 million veterans in the United States, more than 2 million active duty if you include reserve components and National Guard. People who've been trained to lead, people who know what hardship's about, people who understand living according to principle. Why are there so few veterans and former service members getting into the political arena?
Well, it's really hard. I mean, it's very hard, and it's not the kind of hard that we're used to. Put on a rucksack and carry heavy weight for a long time and be under these incredible stressful conditions. It's very hard. I built a startup company, and that's what this is. You have to have the machine built and otherwise nothing works. And everyone gets kind of like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Why does all this take place in politics? And I didn't really understand it until I got involved in this. But here's an example everybody can think of. Has a Pop Warner team ever won the Super Bowl?
Nope.
No. Why? Why? Because they're not a high performing team. So I have to be able to speak to 700,000 people and convey a message to them that is meaningful and it's real. And that takes people and it takes resources. That's why it's just really hard, man. If you could pick up a bunch of folks we know in the service, some of the women and men I've worked with and for, and people are like, oh, you're a SEAL, you don't work for women. That is incorrect. I've worked for plenty of female service members, and I don't care. You know what I mean? If you're competent, you're competent. The external or whatever you are, it doesn't matter to me. But that's why it's just so hard to structure something to be able to get your message out to folks so that they can really understand who you are, the way you think, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. And that's really it, man. It's just you've got to build a national level team, and that's just difficult.
You said, and if people read your bio, that's attached to your campaign. One of the things you say in there is that there are too many politicians in Washington and not enough statesmen. That's an intriguing statement to me, and I agree with it. Can you explain the difference and explain the difference and how
define statesmen?
Define those, and then how you plan on being, the better of those two.
Well, first of all, you have to acknowledge they are two different things. You know what I mean? An example of statesman versus politician that we can use from recent history here, and I'm going to use Dan Crenshaw as an example, who's very graciously endorsed our campaign. The politician part of this COVID deal going down was people angling for pet projects to be inserted into a crisis bill. Now, I mean, I am a thespian, you know what I mean? I've been in 3 different movies, and I'm an artist, I write poetry, I do, and I draw, and I do all this stuff, I get it, the arts are incredibly important, right? But funding the Kennedy Center has nothing to do with saving people's lives in a crisis. And, if you listen to some of those interviews by Dan Crenshaw, man, he's like straight at it. We have to make sure that people have, X insert, whatever that is, to make sure that they can get through this crisis. So the politicians are trying to use a national crisis to better their political positions. And a statesman is like, no, what we're doing here is we're going to do our level best to make sure that we can help American citizens during a time of crisis. And the hardest part about this political thing, honestly, is having to brag about stuff because it is not part of my nature. But when I declared candidacy, like 30 hours later, COVID-19, boom, and locks down. I have a staff of 12 people. And I'm like, hey, we're not doing fundraising. We're not doing any of this stuff. We're going to make something called Neighbors Helping Neighbors of the Wisconsin 3rd District. And they're like, this isn't how you do a political campaign. I'm like, well, I've never done one before, so this is how I'm doing it. And now we're going to play rock, paper, rank. I win, or you can beat feet. They're like, okay, well, that sounds good. So we have this intellectual capacity. I mean, these are very, very smart people. So we built this program, and it's on its own Facebook page. It's apolitical. That's very clear. And it's the lowest grassroots stuff. If you have something in one of my 18 counties and someone can help you in that county, you connect through this page that we established, and I've got to have somebody that sits there and administers it, and you can help each other out. Well, so the difference between the politician, we need to get money and we're going to use this crisis for thing, or going, oh, and halt, I don't care if this is right or wrong. Politically, it's right. So a politician does things right or wrong due to a political thing. A statesman or a stateswoman does something because it's right. And that's what's missing.
See a stateswoman today, Alexandra Cortez, saying that she's not gonna vote for any more money going out to small businesses unless it includes stay-at-home voting. I mean, those kind of issues, right?
Right, and that has nothing to do with helping anyone.
No,
on a practical level, what that has to do is it increases the probability of voter fraud. And that's just what it is. So you just got, the glaring example of someone who's doing something for political purposes by someone who's doing something because it's right. And I'm not going to do that.
It's essentially holding an American taxpayer and American citizens hostage, for the support that they need right now.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, what is your take on? I mean, I have a very strong position on reopening the economy. I think you and I probably share it, but reopen the economy means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, versus the risk. The president made a great statement saying that the solution cannot be worse than the problem.
Right.
Which is the virus worse than people not having jobs, people not being able to buy groceries? And a big point for me at Mighty Oaks is the solution worth making people stay at home when there's a mental health crisis in our country. And I could speak for the veterans community, that what we learned at Mighty Oaks and this work that we do is the single worst thing you could do to someone suffering with anxiety, depression, any type of mental health is isolation. Isolation is this next step, is the kind of last step before people take their lives or have a mental meltdown. And now we're making our citizens do it, our veterans. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts on the mental health versus the actual virus and restarting the economy.
Sure. Well, I wrote all the crisis action plans for the soft response to Special Operations Forces, sorry for the audience, response to crisis actions for all of the countries in Europe.
Wow.
And so I'm really well versed in this sort of thing. And the initial crisis is not the time to challenge leadership. It is not. So my governor, Evers is his name. He's a Democrat. He's a former educator. But so he said, hey, we're locking down the state, and being a citizen of the state of Wisconsin and an American, you listen to your leadership in crisis. And then he arbitrarily extended this another 30 days. And so I am going to exercise civil disobedience for the first time in my life, and I'm going to go march on the Capitol. You know what I mean? Because that's just wrong. So, and not being an epidemiologist, but being an 18 Delta, when someone is sick and they have a contagious disease, you isolate them. You quarantine them, the disease. You don't quarantine the entire planet around the person with the disease. That's the exact opposite of what should be taking place. And we're seeing right now, we're reaping the benefit of someone exercising a plan that was not functional. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution is really clear. It says that any right that is not enumerated specifically to the federal government belongs to the states. So all of these states lockdowns, all the economic disaster taking place in the country, that's square on the shoulders of these governors. So the death of one single human being is a tragedy to at least one other. So I don't want to underplay this. And I have a very good friend, his first name is Rick, and you can pray for him right now if you want. He's in Montana. He's suffering from COVID-19, and he's been on a respirator for a long time. So please don't think I'm diminishing this. But right now we are killing the patient trying to cure a disease. And I'm going to say it today, I'll say it tomorrow, I'll say it the next week. I'm so proud of our president, of President Trump, doing what is right. And it's got to take so much strength. I hope everybody's listening to this is praying for this guy every day, because I do. But we've handled this wrong from the get-go. The models that they use, the one in England and Washington State, have proven to be inaccurate to the point of just lunacy. Meaning, if you have to change the outcome of a statistical model at least 5 times so far, your model's wrong, or your data is wrong. You know what I mean? But we gotta, again, it's the intersection of people facing mortality for the first time and a lack of faith that has led to this fear culture that we are now inculcated with, where we are so concerned about protecting each other. You know, the guys say, "Stay safe." You know, how are you doing? Great. Remember that? My new guys are saying to this in Afghanistan. They go like, "Stay safe," and I go, "Get over here now." And I use some words that I'm not going to use on this program. I'm like, I don't ever want to hear those words come out of your mouth again. If you want to stay safe, go home and become an accountant. You're a Navy SEAL in combat. We will take calculated risks at all time, and they will be risks, but we will never play safe. That is not what we do. And we could use a little bit more of that in the country right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whoa! I got my senior chief on there for a second. How long was I out?
Stay safe if you go to the beach, but don't stay safe if you go to Walmart.
I know.
That's
You know what? These measures are incompatible with reality.
Yeah.
So you're going to stay safe. You can go to Walmart, but you can't buy like a pair of shoes, but you can buy disinfectant. You're like, okay, I don't understand why this individual particular consumer product is going to doom the earth when the one right next to it won't. It's just silly. I think it's like the Salem witch trials all over again at some point. You know, we have to start paying attention to reality and the empiric stuff, that the actual metadata that we're gathering out of this, especially with the serological tests of people who've been exposed to COVID-19 already, they're changing the narrative back to reality. That's how we should have started this program.
And the reality shows the margins of the mortality rate is not, you know, what they thought it was going to be, or what people are still saying it is, you know, in line with a normal influenza. Jeremy and I have had this conversation a lot recently. It's just, I mean, you look at it, there's a reality hitting the point. I think everyone complied at first, just like you said. The governor put it out. You're like, I'm going to comply because it's just the right thing to do. It's not, I'm not forfeiting my rights. I'm not giving up my freedoms. I'm going to stay at my house because it's the right thing to do because it's a virus and we're going to take it seriously. But there comes a point though, that where it becomes, you know, we're not going to play along anymore. It's
tyranny. Yeah.
Overreach. This is tyranny. And there's very real Americans right now. There's a single mom out there that has been laid off of her job. She can't take her children to daycare, and she tomorrow can't buy groceries for her hungry children. That's a very real thing in America, and a $1,200 stimulus check isn't gonna fix that if they even get it anytime soon. And so I think this is, you know, and I think you're right. The president brilliantly has put it on the governors, and the governors need to be held accountable by the people. And I applaud you for wanting to go, you know, and hold your governor accountable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we will exercise social distancing while we're doing that. I mean, we are still responsible. But listen, man, it is the duty of a citizen to obey your government in a time of crisis. And it's the duty of a citizen to disobey your government when they have proven to make tyrannical measures. And I firmly believe that. Let me read something to you, man. This is from a dude. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in a crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. That was Thomas Paine in 1776. And there's a few more words. There's 7 words that were written in 1776 that are directly in line with that. And those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And interestingly enough, I wrote my campaign slogan well before this COVID thing happened, and it was based on those 7 words: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And all of these concepts we were discussing are nested underneath those specific things, man. When your ability to worship God is removed arbitrarily from you by the government, there's an issue with that. Your ability to say things out loud. There's a girl who threatened with jail for writing that she had COVID-19. Your freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, your freedom of private property. All these things you're talking about, changing these things, those are fundamental constitutional rights that we are now, through this time of crisis, where we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? We're past that now. Now we need to get back and really stand up for our constitutional rights. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going to do that this Friday, and I'm going to do it when I get to Washington, D.C., because it's the right thing to do, man.
One of the things that's been interesting to me to watch through this has been conservatives that I agree with, probably on 99% of what they would say, who are almost in a panic over this and saying things like, we're losing our country, we'll never get it back, we'll never return, we'll never be the same, you know, all these things.
Sure.
Do you have hope for our country? And if you do, which I assume you do, or you wouldn't be getting involved in this, where is that hope found? Where do you say, this is the reason I have hope for our future?
Okay. Well, I am the eternal optimist. We've discussed this. Of course I have hope for our country, man. America is the strongest, most resilient country in the history of the world. We're also, interestingly enough, the country that gives more to charity than any other country in the world. So people say you can't have strength and compassion at the same time. We've proven that not to be true. My hope personally always comes from Christ. That's just where it comes from, because that's what that's all about. And my hope for the nation comes from us, the three of us on this line and whoever else is watching. It comes from the youth of our nation. Every generation, grumbles about the next one. There's crazy kids, Elvis Presley, rock and roll stuff, and they said that about me, you crazy 80s music in excess listening, the guy. But my hope comes from a real understanding of how things work, man. And Americans work hard. Wisconsinites work hard. And that's not going to change because of this thing. People are itching so hard to get out and be able to work to support their family again. That's what my friend in the FBI, his name's Jeff Jackson, Jax. Something like that would come along and he would always go, that's what we call a clue. You know what I mean? So if people are wanting to get out there and work, that means that's what they want to do. And they're not going to change, man. Personal hope, Christ, all the time. And then collective hope comes from the citizens of my state and of your states, because you guys are in 2 different states right now, that they're really going to be the Americans that I know they are. Are you going to have leakers? Of course you are. You're always in the SEAL teams. We got the guy like, oh, that guy, it's going to happen. But the vast majority of the citizens of the United States of America want to work. They want to build. They want to grow. They want to support their families. They want to be productive members of their communities. They want the country to be great. And that's not going to change. That's where my hope comes from, reality, man.
So your hope is that they'll do the right thing. What should they specifically do then? So what should citizens do right now, 6 months from now, and 3 years from now? What should citizens be doing? I believe in principled living. I think whatever is going on around you is, but you should always be doing the same things. What are those things?
You should first and foremost seek to help yourself. And by that, I mean, you should be productive for yourself. And that goes to your family. And once you start helping yourself, you can help your family. Once your family has been able to help itself, you can help your neighbors. Once your neighbors can help their neighbors, that means you're by definition helping your community. And once one community helps the other, then you're by definition helping your county, then your state, then your country, man. What they should be doing is you should be doing right. And you should be doing things that are right because it is right, not because you have to. That's like the last, I don't have a copy of my book laying right here somewhere, but that's the last stuff I write about, is doing things because they're right, because you can. I mean, taking the high road and just doing it, man. Get out there. Just remember that you're American citizens. Build things, grow things. I mean, I've got alfalfa outside my window now that's growing now, man. So be the people that you think that you want other people to think you are, is one of the greatest quotes. I want people to think I'm a good man. Well, then be a good man. I want people to think I'm a kind man, to be a kind man. I want to think the people to think that I'm a loving man, to be a loving man. I want people to think I'm a strong man, be a strong man. You know what I mean? People are so much more capable of doing things than they really understand. And I'm 50 now, and I'm still learning that I'm capable of doing things that I never thought possible. And dream. Americans can dream, man. And the difference between an American citizen, the average Joe or Jane on the street, is for some reason or another in this country, not only can we dream, but we also act on it and accomplish it. And we're going to do that again as soon as the stuff lifts up, even before it lifts up. I mean, our country truly is blessed. It is unique. It's exceptional. It really is. And last 8 years were kind of last 8 years previous to our current president now, President Trump, man. There got to be pretty dark there for a while. Yeah. People are talking smack about America and blame America first and all that. Well, that's just wrong. I'm so proud of President Trump coming in and going, you know what? That's just wrong. America's awesome. You're awesome. I'm awesome. She's awesome. Seriously. Yeah. People mocked the president for optimism, and they still are. And you know what? Nah. America is awesome.
I think you said really, really awesome.
Really, really the best, most awesome. Hey, listen, Hey, I did this interview with this guy. He got shot down. He was like 200 feet over a mountain going 700 miles an hour. Was captive and tortured for 7 years in Vietnam, man. And he lives in my district up in Eau Claire. He's 85 years old. And he's like, you know what? I love the fact that the president is optimistic. He's like, yeah, we're going to try to open stuff up in Easter. And, maybe it's not going to work out, right? But one of the things that carried them through that brutal captivity in Vietnam as prisoners of war was optimism and hope.
You have to have
people like that.
Not only do you have to have it, but it should be expected to have it as a leader. And one of the things that the president's been, watching these press conferences, he's getting this hit on, and it's ridiculous to me to get hit on, is why are you so optimistic? Why are you so, and Dan Crenshaw answered it best, and you've heard us saying before, calm produces calm and panic produces panic. And as a leader, you can't display panic. You have to produce calmness, especially in times of crisis. And he's doing exactly what, we've saw in chaos in the military and in chaotic times. And to me, it's just incredible leadership.
Yeah. There's another thing though about this, and Dan Crenshaw did this great interview with what's his name? That guy, Bill Maher.
Yeah.
Very surprised. But so yeah, calm begets calm, right? And the difference between, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that Dan Crenshaw is not a mature leader at all. He is. I don't care where that guy's going, I'm going to follow him. You know what I mean? He's one of those cats. But a real mature, experienced leader, initially when something happens, they're going to be calm because that goes everywhere. But you have to understand that there is a time and a place to be the loudest voice in a storm. So the quiet voice in the storm, but you don't say, hey, maybe you should think about stepping out of the way of the train that's about to hit you. You're like, get out of the way, right? So what's cool about President Trump is, he wasn't in the military, but he understands these military leadership concepts, you know what I mean? So he will be super calm. And then at times it's just like, no, quit it. And that is a sign, a clue, as Jax would say it, of someone who has real experience in executive leadership. It's just great to see. And I can't imagine the pressure that guy's under. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has to be immense. It has to be immense.
Yeah, it's encouraging, reassuring to see that, especially in a time like this. And I think this moment, while we wish this moment wasn't happening in our country, I think it's bringing the best out of him. I think, no one wants this to be a political thing. Unfortunately, it's being politicized.
Yeah.
But I think for those trying to politicize it, it's backfiring on them, because the more fuel they throw in this fire, the better the president's looking. And,
yeah. This is kind of a no-brainer as far as being able to call out these folks that are doing the political stuff during this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just really showing themselves to be just partisan hacks at this point. I hope enough people pay attention to that and they see what's really going down with these folks at this point. And again, the guy that I'm running against, his name is Ron Kind. He's Nancy Pelosi's whip on Ways and Means. And so all of this stuff we're talking about, these crazy trade deals that got held up USMCA and stuff, square on this guy's shoulder, not somebody, like, oh, it's Congress, they're bad. It's this Ron Kind guy held that thing up for 13 months. 1,700 dairy farms went out of business in the state of Wisconsin. That's the difference between a politician and a statesman. A statesman would go, yes, I will push this USMCA through, even though it's going to give the president a smack dab awesome political win, but I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do for the people that I'm representing. And he didn't do that.
Where did you learn that, Derrick? The difference between a statesman and a politician?
By watching leaders.
Yeah.
Those concepts, they transition everything or through everything. There's a term I coined, administrative cowardice. And we've all seen this in the military where someone's like, oh, geez, I don't want to do this because it's not going to be popular, or the commanding general is going to think it's bad or something like that, when it's the right thing to do. And I have no tolerance for that. You can, for your listening audience, you can retire as an E9. And I retired as an E8. I didn't retire as an E9 because I've always, for some reason, just felt compelled to speak truth to power, regardless of the circumstance. To me, I'm just not going to do that. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. And so I think that concept of politician versus statesman, I've been doing a lot of thinking about politics in particular in these last 3 months since we decided to do this. And that really occurred to me, looking at people and dissecting their behaviors, looking at a problem set and then the potential solutions to give you the most advantageous outcome. If that doesn't happen, why did that not happen? And oftentimes, I think the majority of times, it's because people take their own personal political advantage and put that above representing the people of their districts. And I'm telling you, and you guys know me, I will never do that. I don't care. I've never chased a nickel in my life. I don't like bragging about myself. I'm not particularly fond of power. I know that it has to be exercised. It has to be it has to be wielded, I guess, appropriately. And that's what I'll do. And then when I'm done doing my job in DC, I find somebody that can replace me with the same values. And then it's time to come home. And how long is that going to be? I don't know.
Back to the farm. This is a time in our country. I don't think there's ever been a time, at least in our lifetime, that it hasn't been more necessary to vote on principles over partisan politics. I mean, you can't be any American that actually cares about their way of life in this country right now should never check the block based on Republican or Democrat.
Hey, Chad, I don't think you ever should.
I agree. I agree.
If
there's never a time, it's got to be right now. I mean, There's so many moral issues on the docket that transcend a party.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, man. That one of the biggest problems I have in my district is that we do have. You can trace them all the way back to Roosevelt Democrats. Well, right now, Franklin Roosevelt would be a Republican.
Sure.
John F. Kennedy would be a Republican. There's no way. Ask what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you, or whatever. Or excuse me, the other way. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? Do you think those words ever spewed out of AOC's mouth? She's like, give me stuff. Give me stuff now. Give me, give me, give me. She just did that again today, right? Give me, give me, give me. Oh yeah, America, you're horrible. Give me. Kennedy would have thrown up in his mouth if he had heard those words. He would have dropped the donkey off at the post office and walked over and hopped on the elephant. You know what I mean? The country has changed to the point that I would not call Nancy Pelosi, I wouldn't call the Squad, I wouldn't call Adam Schiff, I wouldn't call Jerry Nadler Democrats. I'd call them leftists.
They need a party to run under, but that's the only thing that keeps them in the Democratic Party, right?
The parties, they roughly ideologically align with what you're doing. In my case, the Republican Party really does ideologically align with my beliefs. But you can't tell me Democrats don't want fiscal responsibility. You can't tell me the Democrats don't love their country. You can't tell me Democrats don't love their community. It may seem like it because we look at things through a certain lens, but they love their kids just as much as we do. So let's do something that'll help out the families. How about that? Let's find the common ground that we share as Americans, and let's operate from that starting point. And that's what I'm going to do in my district, man. I'm going to represent every single person here, regardless of if they voted for me or not. That doesn't mean they're not on the team. They're still part of the Wisconsin 3rd District. They're still Wisconsinites. They're still Americans. And I am still obligated to represent them equally. And if we can get past all this other stuff and start doing that, if that calm can go out, Chad, to the storm of the 500 plus reps and the 100 senators, that's when this real fundamental change happens, man. People start putting stuff, they look external to themselves and realize that they owe allegiance to something other than their own selfish goals. That's a statesman.
Derrick, where can people learn more about your campaign, learn more about you, people outside of your district who understand we need you to get elected and get sent to Congress, can support you? Where do you want people to go to find that information and to get behind you?
Okay, thank you. They can go to Van Orden for Congress or Van O for Congress, because my name's been misspelled my entire life. But Van O for Congress, VanOrdenforCongress.com. That's on the old interwebs. And then we have the Facebook page and stuff. But if I would just ask everybody if they could take the time to go to vanordenforcongress.com or our Facebook page, Derrick Van Orden, and like and share stuff, or dislike and share stuff. I don't care. You know, you got your own brain. Use it, man. I tell people that our votes have to be informed by our hearts. They have to, because we're human beings and we are created to care for each other. We just are. But they have to be made with our minds. So I'm asking you, open up your heart, read stuff inherently, make sure that what you're thinking about is to actually do the best for your fellow women and men, but then vote with your mind. You know what I mean? We start doing that, things are going to start getting better.
Awesome. We'll post that in the YouTube link as well.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I want you to think when you're getting squirrely out there, and everybody is at this point, I want you to take a minute, and if you have a Bible, you know, open it up, or if you have the computer, which you clearly do because you're watching us right now, just Google Psalm 46:10. That's be still and know that I am God.
That's good.
And when crazy stuff happens, if you just be still. I told my young nephew before he went to combat for the first time, I'm like, dude, if you have 10 seconds to make a decision, spend 7 of those 10 seconds praying, and then act in the next 3. So just be still and know that God is out there. Be still and know that there is something greater than you, that you can serve. Yeah.
It's been a little while. It's good to get everybody on a show. So good to have you guys. Thank you, Derrick. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll put all of that information, probably even Psalm 46:10, right there in the notes at the bottom of the page on Friday morning when this airs.
Right on.
But really glad, man. Thank you. And we're praying for you in the campaign and look forward to good things. Chad, any final closing words?
I'm just here for anything you need, brother. I'm behind you, and I'm super proud of you. And, you know, thankful for, I know it can be easy to kick your feet back on the farm, but you're you know, putting the kit back on right now and going out and doing what this country needs. And I'm thankful for it.
Well, you're absolutely welcome. And that means a tremendous amount to me, Chad. So thank you very much. And let's also put on the bottom of the page there, make sure you pray for the president. Yep. For his strength, wisdom, and courage, because he needs it now.
Yes.
Exactly right. Awesome, man. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. For those of you that are watching, thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you have not yet, subscribe. You need to do that. Like. And I don't want you to dislike. Derrick may be okay with that. I'm not okay with it. You like it, you share it out, tell people how amazing it is. And this is a message people need to hear. For those of you that are listening somewhere else, again, I'd encourage you to jump back over to YouTube and you can subscribe and like and share and comment. And that would be awesome. Thank you. And we will talk to you next time.